What's going on, family? Listen, I'm excited about another episode of Unscripted. I want you to get ready. This is your boy, Derek L. McRae, coming to you. We're going to talk today about some interesting topics. We're going to make sure we enrich you. We're going to entertain you. We're going to empower you. So get everybody you know, call them and tell them jump in real quick because we're getting ready to turn this thing up. It's going to be unscripted. What's going on, good people? Listen, I know that we told you that we were finished for the season, but this is a special episode. I have a great friend with me today, and I'm excited to have Mr. Crossman to come and talk with us today. As we're going to talk just a little bit about a lot of everything. This is one of the coolest cats that you're going to meet. You know, cats I just kind of dated myself saying cats, but this is one of the coolest guys I know who really is doing some strong behind the scenes things that I want you to make sure that you're following what he has going on and connecting even the greater with him. Because it's amazing how we find that people that we did not know and sometimes didn't expect are doing so much for us, and we really need to highlight that. And so what better time to talk about this than Black History Month, because Black History Month really can't be Black History Month without talking about people who aren't African American as well. And so there are so many who have contributed over the years. Today we are happy to have one of the most strongest supporters right now of African Americans that I know of in Central Florida, state of Florida, Southeast America, you name it. He is connected to almost anybody and everybody doing some amazing things. And so, John, man, I'm happy to have you today. Man, just so much you have going on, man. You know, every time I look at your page, you have been one of the strongest advocates for HBCUs that I've seen. I mean, not just in conversations, but in fundraising, sitting on committees, boards. You know, it's just been amazing. And when we think about this, especially in Black History Month, I really wanted to highlight more some of the great works that people who aren't African Americans are doing as well. And one of the first names that come to mind is Mr. John Crossman. So what drives you to be that person?
Well, I mean, it's to my faith, right? It's to the core of my faith and who I am. Like, you know, I say this, like, you know, when I read the Bible, I believe it, right? Like, we're called to these things. There's that. And then it goes into the influence of my dad and my parents. And you got to understand that when I was growing up, my earliest memories was my dad every single year would have the president of Bethune-Cookman, then college, Dr. Bronson, come in and be a guest pastor with his concert chorale. I mean, my youngest memories. I knew about Bethune-Cookman before I knew about Florida State,
Wow.
you know, UCF or anything. I didn't know those existed, right, for a big part of my life. And a lot of people don't understand that when my dad was doing that, like now I think people hear that, well, that's cool. Then he would get death threats for that, right? Yeah. Because for these people in the early 70s and then in the 70s, the 80s, and even early 90s, it was the first time they had a black man in a leadership position over them, right? And so that was a big deal. But as a young man, being 5 and 6 and 7, I just heard this phenomenal pastor preaching. I'm like, man, this guy's awesome. And then to this day, Black gospel music is my favorite music of all times. I recently introduced Mahalia Jackson to my daughters, like, you need to hear this kind of thing. So that really, to my core, shaped me. Where it goes further is this. As a professional, I started getting asked to do lectures at colleges, and I've had the honor of lecturing at about 30 different universities across the country, different time, different ways. And if you came with me, I mean, you would be like, man, John, these are nice young people. You know, every college, they're all kind of the same. Sometimes people get mad at me when they say that because they want to think their alma mater is better than this one. But if you're lecturing at college, they're all kind of the same. But then there's a gap, and there's one guest lecture experience that's different than all the others, and it's at FAMU.
Well, you're a very wise man, John.
So I'm telling you, listen to me. I've lectured at Florida State, Miami, UNC, Ole Miss, Wharton, I mean, all these different places. And then I guest lecture at FAMU, and it blows my mind. And let me just tell you what happens at FAMU. When you lecture at a district college, you know, students are in shorts and baseball caps, whatever. You get done with the lecture, and you say, are there any questions? And they all have kind of dead eyes. I mean, they're kind of listening, but they don't want you to call them, and they don't raise their hands. When you guest lecture at FAMU SBI, there's 80 students in the audience. They're all in suits. And when you say, are there any questions, 80 hands go up. And when you pick any one of them, they'll ask you the most interesting, terrifying question about your past because they've researched you, right? So what hit me as a professional is there's great talent out there that my industry is unaware of, right? So whenever I talk about diversity, I always say this. Diversity is not about lowering the bar. It's about widening the net.
That's good. That's good.
So was the 1952 University of Alabama football team the best representation of the athletes in the state? No, clearly not, right? So right now, when I think about the applicant pool coming into commercial real estate from the state university system in Florida, is it the best applicant pool? I would tell you right now it is not.
Wow.
Because we're not seeing enough of these FAMU kids applying for jobs because they don't know the industry exists, right? That's an example of systemic institutional racism, the lack of education. But then the industry's suffering because we don't see the talent. So as we have more diversity in commercial real estate, it's not lowering the bar of commercial real estate, it's widening the net so that we get the best talent.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I love the fact that I saw that you also are offering a scholarship for that as well.
Right. So one of the things we did is we created the first real estate scholarship at Bethune-Cookman, and then we did the first one at FAMU. Then when I was in Jackson, Mississippi, where my wife's family's from, my wife's family was talking about the murder rate in downtown Jackson. And, I'm just not, the way I was raised, you don't hear about a problem and you just listen to it and then tweet like, oh, that's bad. Like, let's do something. You're that way.
Yeah.
You see something, you're like, let's get going. So I endowed the first ever real estate scholarship at Jackson State. And when I did that, we got the governor there, got the president of Jackson State there, and it's just exploded. Great support. But the newer one that I'm excited about is the University of Florida has a Masters of Real Estate program. It's #1 in the nation. Now think about, when we start talking about real estate, we say landlord.
Yeah.
Think about that word, landlord, right? Real estate has been used to control people since the dawn of man.
Yeah.
If you know the book Pride and Prejudice, the story Pride and Prejudice, or my daughters like the movie Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies, which is a very good love story plus zombies. But the premise of that book is what? A wealthy man has all daughters. He can't leave his land to his daughters. Okay? That's how you control women. That's how you control minorities, right? In the state of Florida, a woman could not buy real estate in our state by herself without a man's signature until the 1970s.
Wow.
So it's how you control voting. Like this is the whole thing. So here's the University of Florida, Masters of Real Estate program, #1 in America, zero diversity, right? I mean, you walk in there's 40 students in there, and they're all great, but it's like 38 white country club looking kids, nice kids, but there it is. So what I said was to Mr. Bergstrom, who's their largest donor, he's a good guy, and I said to him, why don't we combine together and create a full ride as long as you graduate from HBCU.
Wow.
Now keep in mind, you don't get the scholarship. You can't apply for the scholarship until you get admitted to the university. So you have to apply first, then you get admitted. So we announced it. We had a nice young lady, very impressive, from Jacksonville, went to FAMU, working. She applied, got in. She got a full ride.
Wow. That's awesome.
She sent me a note, and the note said, Mr. Crossman, thank you for changing my life, and signed it.
Yeah.
That broke me, right? But I want to tell you the sad part of this, we have one scholarship, we had one applicant. Okay? This year, what I would love to be in this position, I'd love to see 10 applicants. And then I'd like to call my buddies and say, hey, man, I gave one full ride. Why don't you help me give 9 more? Right?
Yeah.
So we're still fighting that fight,
Yeah.
right? But it's a step.
Yeah.
It's a step into that space.
And that's one of the things that I love, because you're so in tune with history, and also you have a vision for future.
Right.
And you understand the investment of people and
Right.
investing in the generation that's coming.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on right now in Tallahassee around this race theory and teaching race in school and making one population a little uncomfortable as we talk about history. It's kind of become a lot really uncomfortable discussion. And what I hate is what most happens often in politics. It becomes a Democrat produced it, and so if a Democrat produces something, Republicans are against it, or a Republican produced it, that means all the Democrats are against it, because we don't want to divide the party lines. And it's amazing. You're a Republican, I'm a Democrat. We're great friends, and we see eye to eye on a lot of different things as well.
And where we don't, you educate me, and I have
and vice
changed,
versa.
and I've changed on issues, and
Yes.
I need that, I want that.
Yes, and it's amazing because one of my good friends as well, Rod Love, who is a Republican, Rod and I became close, and he tells the testimony all the time. We became close because he was sitting on one side of a desk. He had some information I didn't have. I was sitting on another side. I came with some strong Democratic friends to contest something that they were putting up. Rod did not expose me that day on the panel. Instead, he made a phone call, said, "Can we talk?" And I said, "Sure." Rod came to my office, my first time meeting him face to face. And he says, "I just want to give you some backdrop to what I'm pushing." And when he told me, I said, my knowledge of this and you revealing this to me has changed my stance. And we became the best of friends from that day until today. And to this day, he's still a Republican. I'm still a Democrat. And I want people to see that we can really be in differences of parties and still not be in differences. We don't have to have a difference because of the fact that we just decided to label ourselves a little differently. But with this whole theory that's kind of going on in this proposal to teach, some people are uncomfortable. And I follow you a lot on social media, so I see kind of your theories and your thoughts as well. Just talk to us a little bit about what you think about this proposed legislation that's kind of going on.
All right. So let me say first a couple things. One is I always tell my daughters, you can be about principles or you can be about power, but it's hard to be about both.
That's good.
If you're about principles, you let power go, right? So if you and I say we want to help people in Central Florida, and somebody comes up and they're a super liberal, Democrat, whatever, and they got a great idea, and you're like, let's do that idea, right? If they're this super conservative Republican, but it's working, you're like, well, let's do that idea, right? So if we're committed on principle, we'll let go of power. Somebody might say, well, gosh, if we partner, you know what? Maybe I'll never get a presidential appointment by a Republican president. Maybe you'll never get a presidential appointment by a Democrat president. But if you and I both say, you know what, we'll let that power go, that opportunity for you to advance our own careers on principle, we're going to be okay. But if we sell it to power, if we are like, man, I really, really want to be the guy in this power structure, then you're going to release in principle.
Wow.
Right? That's why you and I get along. Yeah. Because we're not wrapped up, right? We don't have a problem calling balls and strikes, and we're okay. So I think first you got to start with that. The second thing I'd say is that when people are saying things, my question is like, what is the result they're trying to get? Critical race theory, I think, has been used by both sides to raise money. Like it's a dog whistle on both sides, like yell and raise money, like. But what is it actually doing? And so my response is, I don't want to get wrapped up in that subject of critical race theory. This is John's thing. I want to be about CRA, collaborative race action. I don't want to be critical. I want to be collaborative. We do have issues with race. I want to do actionable items. Right? And listen, man, when somebody says to me they want to make a difference and they're unwilling to make a sacrifice, I got no time for that. Okay? Like, if somebody said to me, hey, John, I want to make a difference. I was thinking about going on this really nice vacation. I'm not going to go on that vacation. I'm going to tell them to take that money. I'm going to write a check to Bethune-Cookman University or Fayette College of Law. Brother, you're my kind of guy, right? But if you want to be on a diversity and inclusion committee and you're going to check that box and you're going to make no sacrifice and then you say you want to make an impact, I got no time for you. Yeah. You see what I'm saying?
That's good.
So that's where I'm coming from. Let me also say this. All of history is ugly and painful.
It is.
It's all bad, man. I mean, you and I could talk on and on and on. Now, there's beauty in it. There's beautiful things that happen, and there's wonderful things that happen. But there's no way you're going to look at that. You're not going to come back and say, man, that was terrible. There was a French colony up near St. Augustine that was like thriving and doing well. And the Spaniards found out about it, and they just went in there and killed everybody, right? And I mean, how many things like that we could, we're going to go yell at Spanish people today? Or, I mean, to me, history is messy and ugly. What I always tell people is you're not responsible for past sins, but you are responsible for being part of solutions today, right? And so if we're going to love history, we got to talk all about history, all of it. I have a friend named Helen Greenspun, lives in Orlando, one of the most amazing human beings in our community. She was in Poland when the Nazis came in. They killed her parents. She dodged the Nazis for 2 years. She was in the labor camps for 2 years. And then she was in Dachau for 2 years, got liberated by the U.S. Army. Okay. If you ask her today, she's in her 90s, how did you survive the Holocaust? Do you know what her answer is? Good Germans.
Wow.
German soldiers that gave her food. German soldiers that looked the other way while she got some food. She survived because there were Germans, and a lot of my family tree is German. They said this is wrong, and they did what they could to help.
Yeah.
So history is messy. It's complicated. So we do talk specifically on critical race theory. When I'm at Bethune-Cookman board meetings, we don't talk about it. When I'm at FAMU, we don't talk about it. I think critical race theory, it's been taught for years at a graduate school level, and it makes sense to be taught at a graduate school level. I think history should be taught in the reality of history at every level, but it needs to be taught in a way that's accurate and affirming and fluid, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a tough thing to accomplish. My youngest daughter, her name's Ava. She's beautiful, and she has blonde hair and blue eyes. She has that look to her. She was in middle school, and there was a substitute teacher talking about the Holocaust, made her stand up, and she said, all of you other people here would be killed in the Holocaust, and because she has blonde hair and blue eyes, she would not be.
Wow.
Now, remember I just talked about Helen Greenspun? Helen Greenspun has blonde hair and blue eyes. That is not true, right? It's historically inaccurate, and how humiliating to my daughter.
Definitely so.
Okay, so as a dad, I was pretty angry. So I waited a few days. Who did I call that came to my rescue? The Holocaust Center. I called the Holocaust Center. They jumped on it. They gave my daughter a private tour, and they affirmed her for how she looks and said Germany today is a great place for Jews to go. They were so wonderful and so loving to my daughter, right?
Yeah.
So, we do need to talk about race and skin color, and all those different things are important, but we really need to do it in a healthy, fluid way. So you asked about the legislation. Man, politicians do what they do, and there's a lot of politicians I love and respect, and there's some I don't. But whatever they do, they do. I'm on the front lines. I'm trying to get kids through college. Can I say one thing real quick about race? I talked to my mom about this morning. My mom has she worries. So I may have told you this before, one of the times you and I talked, that I ran track in college. I was a sprinter, and I ran the family relays all 4 years, a very meaningful part of my life. And the whole time, people would always say to me, man, you must be part black. I would hear that. And I, kind of laughed it off. But my cousin and I would talk about it. And so a couple years ago, my mom and I did the Ancestry.com. Then turns out her dad was black. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, he always would say he was part Cherokee or something. But I have a friend of mine who's a really interesting guy. I want to come back to this. And he's a super history guy. And he has a family member that died or fought in Valley Forge. And he has a family member that died in Gettysburg, and he's really big. He's been to those places. And he's an older guy. He's a military guy. He's a veteran himself. And he doesn't like all this critical race theory stuff. He doesn't like, we're changing names and we're doing this. He doesn't like it. So I sat down with him and I said, I want to show you something. This is my family tree. I've researched it. There's my mom and dad, and then on my dad's side, his father goes back to Germany, and the part goes back to Ireland, and then my mom on this side. And then there's my grandfather. And when it gets to his father, it's blank. It's nothing.
Wow.
We can't find anything about that, man. I said, so do you understand, when we talk about family tree, you're celebrating your family tree. You know your family tree. You have the documentation. But I have this one branch. There are people in our community that they can't track any branches. Pastor, when I said that to him, this is last week, his heart broke. He just was like, oh. He got it.
Wow. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So that's history, right? Honoring his history and giving him a perspective of history that's not demeaning of him as a man or demeaning to him, his family tree, but trying to get him to understand, have empathy of this is also part of U.S. history. Does that make sense, all that?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. You said something that I thought was really, really powerful and also passionate. History is ugly, no matter what history is. Even when you go back to the African Americans and we talk about Africa and the process of how we even got here, history is ugly. But what I really love that you said was, we're not having these conversations because of a indebtment that we have to pay back for what somebody else has done. It's just communicating to us and educating us just on from where we have come from. And I think sometimes people get uncomfortable in history discussions because they start thinking about, well, how much is this going to cost of me to do, when the actual notion should just be that all of us have a part to play.
Yeah.
Let's all roll up our sleeves and get involved to make sure that we just never repeat what we once had.
What was it? Malcolm X said, and I'm going to get it wrong, forgive me, but it was like an unacknowledged wound doesn't heal, right? Was it like if you put a knife 6 inches back and you pull it out? And somebody was mad at me on Facebook the other day because they said, you're talking about slaves like that. And I responded back. I'm like, the guy was like, you're making it worse by talking about it. I'm like, well, no, it's by not talking about making it worse. And, I have some real hard feelings about, I'm a Seminole in Florida State. I love Florida State. But our College of Law was stolen from FAMU, right? People get uncomfortable when I say that. And I'm not saying we got to shut down FSU College of Law. I'm not saying that at all. I love FSU College of Law. I'm just saying at some point, let's acknowledge that. Let's apologize for that. Let's lean into that. Let's talk about it, I just got done doing one of my favorite events all year long, and it's the Suicide Walk. And
I saw that.
I let me tell you, I never feel closer to Christ like I do that day, because you're seeing people and their deep wounding and hugging them, right?
Yeah.
And, my church, I try like crazy to get my church to come to it. They would not come to it. And I finally got a point, like, I'm not going to ask anymore. I'm just going to go. But I had to realize it's just too painful for them. But not talking about suicide doesn't make suicide stop.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
We need to lean in and talk about the resources for it. So I like hard topics. I like talking about race. I like talking about mental health. And I like talking about addiction and suicide. These are hard things. But you know what? And I love talking about the past. I love studying history. But we can impact the future, and we can impact it in very meaningful ways, right?
Yeah.
What I would encourage, people in your congregation is like, don't get wrapped up. Don't get a rise out of some crazy thing that someone's trying to get your money. They're trying to get your power. They're trying to get you focused in one direction because they've got an agenda. Instead, use your power and your time wisely to invest in things that really matter, right?
Yeah. One of the things I really love with that, John, is I think that you're so comfortable in having those tight conversations, those real challenging conversations, because of where your heart is and your effort is. And some people become a little bothered because reality sometimes is actually a pointed pen lens to see that you really could have done more, or you really should have done more. And so sometimes truth gives us discomfort.
Yeah.
But when you are about working to do some things, you can embrace it because you know that this is my effort. And I think that your communications, it helps you to create your theory or create your response to how do we better this through those conversations. And a lot of times people don't want to discuss it because they don't want to address it, because to address it means we have to do something on it.
Well, and I would also say that to have really hard conversations, you have to have trust. You really have to have established trust.
Yeah.
And, sometimes people I'll ask a question on social media and somebody will say, you're gaslighting. I'm like, man, I'm just asking.
I hate the terminology, but I
hate that phrase.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just trying to ask a question. But I have a good friend of mine, and he's very supportive of what I do, but he doesn't get HBCUs. Now, he's patient with me, but he doesn't get it. And so every once in a while, he'll ask a question. And so one day he said to me, he's like, hey, I just want to say this. He's like, isn't fatherlessness a big issue in the black community? Now he's trying to put that on the table. He doesn't want to get me mad or whatever. And I said, do you believe that's an issue? And he said, yes. I said, well, if you believe that's an issue, then you should be really supportive of black colleges. And he was like, oh.
Now I get
I said, thank you. Like, if that's your belief, one of my favorite things is like, I'm not a big President Trump guy. I respect the position, but I'm not on the same page with the individual. But he provided a ton of support for HBCUs.
He did.
And what's funny to me, Pastor, you're gonna notice, I have had Republicans and Democrats get mad at me when I say that, because I'll say it, and I've had Republicans say, "No, he didn't," and I'm like, "Yes, he did."
Just look at the numbers.
Yeah, and then I say it to Democrats, and they get mad. I'm like, "Guys, can you both stop? Like, can we just agree that was a good thing?"
More than the previous president did.
Right.
Before him. So that's just the truth,
Right. And look, you gain credibility in my mind when you highlight somebody, hey, I agree with this person on that issue. I had the, listen, like you, I've had the honor of meeting some really impressive people, right? Probably number one, Michelle Obama. I'm telling you, I don't get breathless, speechless, like awestruck often. Michelle Obama did that to me. And, every once in a while I'll put the picture up of she and I together. I like it because it looks like we're at prom together or something. It's a good picture. But I always tell people, it's like, she is so kind.
She is.
And I don't agree with her on, some political issues, but that's okay. I agree with her on kindness. And if we can agree on that kindness, well, then we can have really hard conversation. But it comes back to there's got to be trust. If somebody doesn't trust each other, there's no point in having a hard conversation.
Right.
You're just going to yell at each other.
Right.
But maybe we can start working more. Where can we find trust and then work from there? Also, let's say this. We all have personal responsibility. Like we need to work and not be sinning, right? We need to work on that. But then institutions need to have responsibility. And so as we have trust in each other, we also need to have trust in institutions. If there's a level of our society that doesn't trust an institution, we got a problem.
Yeah.
If most of Orlando trusts the IRS, but some demographic doesn't, we all need to say, what's going on with that?
Yeah.
Like we all need to trust the fire department. We all need to trust the school system. And so we have to learn how to have those conversations. And even if you say, well, I trust them and I trust them, but then we find out some other segment doesn't trust them, that's bad.
It is.
There was a group of Asian restaurants that got robbed in Orlando, like 10 of them, and none of them called the cops. That's not good, right? And that should bother us, that some of our brothers and sisters in our community are not feeling safe to call law enforcement, right?
Yeah, that's you make a very good point. And we got to wrap up, John. But listen, this is a very spirited discussion. I got to get you back on to talk
Anytime.
again as well. But trust is huge, and we have to figure out how do we find common grounds, and let's build from there. And sometimes the common ground will lead us into future territories. But we have to start out with that common ground, just the trust element. And that's just going back to being human, just humanity of us. And a lot of times we put so many things ahead of humanity. And that's why it's so cloudy that we can't really see what's necessary for us to build a better place for all of us to reside. Because and I liken this until something me and my wife do in marriage counseling. So if the man says it wrong, the woman has to understand, just give him a moment to be human, because maybe his speech came out wrong. It doesn't mean he wants to destroy his queen, because if the queen is destroyed, the castle is still going to suffer. Or if the woman says it wrong, it doesn't mean that the woman wants to demeanor the man. It just means that she said it wrong. Give her a moment to be human. And we have to be willing to give each other opportunities to have human moments. Let's find the humanity of us. That's the way that life is going to be better. And I definitely want to have you on today, my friend, to talk about just the things that you are doing, the person that you are, and even from the history that you've come through, and your dad's courage and his willingness to be a little risky back in the day to even embrace such a change. But look at the seed that was planted years ago, and look at the product, the harvest that has come forward. And man, we appreciate your father for putting the seed in you, that you're able to do the things now. And this is a word to the future culture, to know that somebody has to start it, and every person should be willing to be the person who starts.
Thank you. And we're going to spend eternity together, so we better learn to get along now.
Exactly.
Right?
Definitely.
Like, let's get that figured out now.
Yeah.
So thank you. I'm always honored to be with you. Thank you.
Well, this is another episode of Unscripted, and this for real is the last episode for the season. And we will be back again for season number 3. And so I want you all to go ahead and make sure that you're liking us. Join us on YouTube. Like that YouTube. I'm going to do it as I always do. Hit the bell. Ding, 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 ding. Hit the bell at the top. Because we want you to be updated on everything that's happening. Season 3 is going to be very explosive and powerful as well. We're looking forward to coming back to you. This is Black History Month. Glad to have my friend, Mr. John Crossman, on with us today. I want you to go and share this with somebody else as well. Tell them it's time for all of us to start developing lines of trust. And it starts out with just simple conversations. Let's find what we can be in common in instead of what we are so against. And I promise you, we can find more that we're for than we will find that we're against. So I want you to continue to be who you are. Why? Because you matter. Y'all have a super fantastic day on purpose. Take care. And until next season, God bless you all.